All right, so here we're sitting to talk down with John Davis, a flat Earth expert that Dookie Royale met in the Flat Earth Society group. Howdy, John. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How about you?
Hey, doing great, man. Glad to have you on. So, I guess if you could maybe give us a little background, have you always been a believer in the flat Earth?
No, not always. It's been about 15 years since I came around to the flat Earth way of thinking. Um, in that time, I've worked for Daniel Shenton's Society. I still perform quite a few administrative functions there, and I founded the American Flat Earth Society about 3 years ago.
Oh, cool. So, what got you? So, you were raised, uh, I guess, basically like the rest of us, assuming that the world is a sphere that is revolving around the sun, and you've seen, of course, the globe in all of your
Mhm.
classrooms and all around you. So, I don't know about you, but for me, it's the kind of thing where I never really thought about whether the Earth was flat or spherical or any shape for that, or rhombus or whatever, because it's hard to deny. It's hard to question something that you're just absolutely told is fundamental fact. So, at what point, I guess, what got you thinking maybe that the world was not spherical?
Well, I was actually started a little more generally than that. When I was a younger man, I started questioning a lot of the beliefs I'd been, like you said, sort of force fed, and just sort of took for granted as true. This led me to a pretty lengthy study where I was looking at a lot of different theories of Hollow Earth, uh, just a lot of different worldviews in which we try to make truth both orthodox and some unorthodox ones. And I came across some literature from the Flat Earth Society, and it kind of just resonated with me on a logical level, and then also on a personal level. And since I've been searching for the truth down that road,
Okay. So this was like, I guess if this was, how many years ago was this?
I'd say about 15.
So that was kind of almost like pre-internet days. And I mean, the internet was around, but there wasn't nearly as much information, and Google wasn't really around. So how did you come across this information?
One of the first places I heard the theory mentioned at all, and it was sort of more as just a piece of fiction, was through 1984, where George Orwell specifically mentions the flat Earth. Um, there are a few other places. Mostly, I was doing work out of a library, and I came across some historical note about Samuel Botham, and then that led me to read some of his books and continue down the path to read some of the other flat earthers from that time.
I read some of his stuff on Wiki, Samuel, and a lot of the Bedford level experiment was what he was trying to counter in his arguments for the globe theory, I guess. The Bedford level experiment was, these Englishmen who, what was it? They had a line or something that they put in some. Maybe it was like on a river, and they put a picture or a piece of paper way down the river, and they tried to looking at it through survey equipment. It sounded like.
Oh yeah, basically the version I heard, they were using sticks, and then at the end of the so and so miles down the river, they put it was something like a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Others have repeated it since then, and it was intended to prove the that all standing water is level, or even flowing water, which would be fairly damning to the round Earth model.
Right, because the math says that like the Earth is 25,000 miles in circumference, and if you have something sitting miles out in the distance, you're supposed to be able to see it, or you shouldn't be able to see it because it would be so many feet under the curvature of the Earth.
Correct. Similar to how you might expect to see, or we're told to see a ship sinking on the horizon at the beach. It's that same basic principle. And it was a question about whether these numbers actually add up to what we believe if the Earth was round. And it was interesting because a lot of notable uh, round Earth scientists, like Alfred Russel Wallace, who's largely responsible for, with Darwin, responsible for theory of evolution, got into the mix, and it wasn't very pretty.
Yeah, I read a bunch about it, and yeah, there was like lawsuits and things that went back and forth. There was wagers, with big name people that said they
It
could
really
prove that
was.
the Earth was a globe.
Yeah, someone had, I believe, from the Flat Earth Society, bet a considerable amount, um, and then once they all got down there and did the experiment, I guess there was some disagreement as to the outcome, and it ended up in the long run bankrupting the Flat Earth. I believe it was John
That's right.
Hanson, but it sent him into destitution and kind of put a pretty big stick in his craw for quite a while against Alfred Russel Wallace and his other opponents.
Hey, now, so do you have like any formal scientific training? Are you in any engineering or physics or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I've been trained in mathematics and computer science, and I probably use computer science a little bit more in my day-to-day work. But so I'm a software engineer, but a lot of my flat Earth work does make use of my talents in mathematics.
Sure.
So now tell me this. So do you come from the background where like you believe in the Old Testament, the verses that spawn out of that, speaking of the firmament, which almost implies there's a dome around us, or do you just come kind of strictly from like a math science or reasoning for this theory?
Well, it's silly for me to discount like all religious evidence. However, I wouldn't say that's my driving point, and I don't think that's my background either. I try to make it as much about facts and reason. Um, I'm not really against literal interpretations. I mean, I'm not really for literal interpretations of the Bible or
Okay.
any other text. Though it is interesting that when you look at just about any religion at its foundations, you can find a healthy amount of quotes within their religious text saying that the Earth is flat.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. Now, so what is your theory though? I mean, so if the Earth is flat, do you accept the standard flat Earth map that looks like the UN logo?
Well, that's not. I wouldn't say I accept that. I accept it as one of the valid theories out there. My theory is a bit different than other people's, and they always have been, because I've always been trying to reach closer to the truth and discover more about the flat Earth rather than simply take what others have done and eat it in the same way that I would have round Earth. Uh,
Okay.
so in my view, it's a lot more complicated than that, and it kind of gets into non-Euclidean space and some of Einstein's work. I'm not sure if it would interest you to me for me to go down that line, interest you guys for me to go down that line. But my favorite single thought experiment you can do to hopefully make that little click to see how my theory makes sense is in the description of a satellite. Now, one thing we know from if the Earth is round, or even if it's not, we have experimental evidence that satellites are not accelerating. That means they're not changing speed or direction. A lot of times you'll hear that a satellite is in free fall. That means exactly that it is not accelerating. Analogy sometimes you'll hear is that someone's spinning a ball at the end of a string, and then you have one force, pseudo force gravity, which is pulling it downwards and outwards, being evened out by the centripetal pseudo force.
Mm.
So these two pseudo forces even out. Now, one thing that Einstein, well, maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself a bit there. Uh,
I was going to say, yeah, feel free to go as far into the Einstein stuff as you want. That's probably some of the more important stuff to talk about.
Sure, yeah. And so when the satellite, we can say that it's not changing direction or speed, and so we are left sort of with Einstein realizing that this is an object that's traveling in a straight line through curved space, and that's why it appears to go around in a circle around the Earth. In a more accurate way, it is definitely going in a straight line, though. This is sort of in accordance with Newton's laws, which say something will keep on traveling in the same direction until it's acted upon by another force. Okay, so then we take the instance of all these supposed satellites, every single one that's supposedly around the round Earth, and we realize that they're all traveling in straight lines because they're all stable orbit. And this is being a bit fuzzy about it because some of them aren't in stable orbit, but some of them are going to crash to the ground after however many years. But given the assumption that they're in stable orbit, all these are traveling in a straight line, and thus the surface area in curved space is flat. Just because you have one satellite traveling that way, one traveling that way, and so on. From there, it's pretty easy to show the Earth is flat. We've already shown that the bounding space is flat, and we can assume that there's a certain amount of distance between each of these satellites and Earth, and that distance is more or less constant and more or less static. From there, you can see that each one of these upper points corresponds with a point down on the Earth, and that the surface of the Earth is also flat in curved space.
So it's curved space. Okay, that's interesting. So it's like maybe it affects our perception of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to affect how we look at it. And again, this isn't the view that a lot of flat earthers hold. It's sort of the cutting edge, if you will. But
yeah.
But I think it's one of the more interesting ones because it really highlights a few issues with our philosophy of science and how we say something's true. If I can, how can we say the Earth is round? If I can go and take an example like this, and the experiment itself is really based off the elevator thought experiment by Einstein, with a going a little deeper than that, but still it's the same basic ideas there. So I take this basic thought experiment by Einstein, alter it slightly within what seems to be logical bounds, fairly logical bounds, using Newton's laws and using his terminology, and I end up with the complete opposite revelation than most people have, that the Earth is flat. So we have this one theoretical framework splitting off and saying, well, the Earth is round. Yeah, but if you look at it from an inertial frame of reference, it's actually flat.
Huh. Now, so if that's true scientifically, what's going on with all these other quote unquote scientists, who obviously would say that that's not true? Like obviously Neil deGrasse Tyson is a big he's our big famous token scientist on TV.
Sure.
You had Carl Sagan, his predecessor. Of course, I've read by some people that are, extreme conspiracy theorists that say these guys are either like Satanists or they're Freemasons or they're paid actors that are working. They're either actors who are just sending out false information, or they are actually liars that are actually scientists or some kind of sorcerer. What's your answer to that? Those people, who are they, and why are they out there advocating and spreading, false information?
Well, I think for the large part, the vast majority of academics are simply incorrect. A lot of people would point to a conspiracy. They'd create a giant thing. There's a lot of things I can say about NASA that isn't, aren't very nice. Do I think
Sure.
they're part of the conspiracy, though? I would rather choose to believe that, and I think it is a choice on this level and on the level of an overarching conspiracy, but I'd rather choose to believe that people make mistakes than people are evil. Now, this is a fairly naive view, I realize, and it doesn't always match up with reality, but in this sort of situation, I would. Now, and it should be noted that I have talked to several PhD levels, academics, and in the area of physics, and they have said, well, yeah, that's a valid way to look at relativity, but I wouldn't look at it that way. And so you can kind of see they're not really interested in looking for that kind of question. They're not really interested in asking that kind of question. And they're not really interested in throwing their careers away either, which is something that would easily happen if they said the Earth was flat.
So you would say basically like one person back in history was incorrect in their assumptions, but everybody else assumed that they were correct, and it's just going forward with people incorrectly assuming things as opposed to people intentionally being like evil and corrupting our minds and tricking us into knowing what's real.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of that, and I think it's also that they just haven't looked at it from the same angle as I. I think a lot of people like to think of science as some definitive body of truth, of facts that we can say, and I think the reality of it is that it's a little more fuzzy than that, and it's a little less pigeonholed than that. When we look back to ancient Greece and their early success with discovering things about our world, we see that a lot of that comes from having so many different points of view and so many schools of thought within the same community. Nowadays, we have one school of thought in the same community, and if you deviate from that, you'll ruin your whole academic career. If you look at someone like Paul Fairbairn, who suggested that science is actually anarchic, or an enterprise of anarchy, you see him being shunned from the whole community for an idea which he supported reasonably, and he made a valid argument for it, whether it's true or not. So it's hard for any academic or any scientist to move away from their body of learning, not only because of the huge community pressure within the scientific and academic communities, but also because they've gone through a long and lengthy training process to get to where they are today. And even to simply say, oh, all this is bull, everything I've worked on my whole career is not right, and all the entire long path I've taken to get to where I am today to be a PhD, it's not valid. Who's going to throw away 15 years of not only what they believe, but what they've been taught and what they've worked hard for?
I feel like they'd be absolutely shunned if they did that. They would never find a job anywhere else, right?
Well, they would be assumed that they would have gone crazy.
So there's
most people's standards, I guess.
You have your theory of what that space is maybe curved. What are some other? I know that there's a puddle theory, right, where we're in like a melted space, and then further down the ice sheet there's another melted space, and maybe that's where aliens or UFOs are coming from. We're all on this, but we're all still on a plane, right? There's other existences out there.
Definitely. And I think that's one that spurred a lot from not only Robotham's work, but also some of my own, just showing that a infinite plane would be mathematically stable. And you're kind of interested in that proof. I can provide that later to any of your listeners that are interested. But it basically uses Gauss's law. And that's one of my that's one of the more interesting theories. We also have one where there's a definitive edge to the disk, which has an ice wall around it, and the logo that you mentioned earlier, the UN logo, would suffice to give us not an accurate map, but a good idea of what's going on.
Ironically, though, with what's weird is what I've read is that it matches up with the UN logo, except for the UN logo almost intentionally does not include the ice wall. Like there's no Antarctica mentioned on the.
It's like an olive leaf. There's like olive leaves around it or something like that, like the olive branch extending outward.
Sure.
Yeah, so
just off the top of my head, I could probably think of a few reasons why you might purposely exclude it or use symbolism to obfuscate it a bit, and as well as if I was being less critical of the UN and other World Health Organization and other organizations like that, simply that nobody does live in the Antarctic, so it's better to de-emphasize it because we're talking about societies built for humans.
Yeah, I guess that would be the rational explanation they would want to give, right?
Yeah, sure. And it's not that unreasonable one. I
guess their answer would also make you want to stop asking questions, which is probably what they'd want as well.
Oh, definitely.
So it's interesting how that movie, The Truman Show, kind of depicts this, what some people believe to be the flat Earth. Do you think there's any intentional, do you think that was intentional that they put that in there, or was that just kind of coincidence?
Well, I think it is a bit of coincidental, and it's not a new idea. We have various different ideas that are roughly the same thing coming out in fiction for years and years, and uh, probably a lot longer than I can remember worth of years worth of fiction. So it's not new, and it's one that's deeply rooted in skepticism and skeptical arguments. Uh, so I would think it was traditional. I mean, it was was just lucky that it happened to be in the Truman Show too.
Yeah, I guess there's been a couple other movies that have similar kind of concepts, and I mean, obviously, The Matrix is a similar idea, but in a different kind of a level of reality. I must say, I got pretty excited when I found out about flat Earth. I mean, I'd first heard about flat Earth and amongst many other things, and I didn't really look into it because, obviously that seemed kind of silly. Why would I waste my time? But then I then maybe like a year later stumbled upon a video that kind of brought up some interesting points. And to me, it's just exciting about the idea that we're allowed to question things that are, it's like you don't even have the realization that, oh, I can question that. And then I started thinking, well, if I quote unquote know that the Earth is a sphere, then clearly I've tested it for myself, because I can't really know anything unless I've tested it for myself. And then I started thinking, well, how can I test it? And I've kind of drawn a blank now, because the only way I can really test it is to go up in a spaceship and look down. You got to go really high though to look down and see the true full sphere shape. I don't have the money to do that, and I don't think that's that easy to pull off right now in the year 2016. The other option, I guess, would be if if the flat Earth model is like a lot of people theorize, where there's Antarctica is actually like more of an ice ring. You could, I guess, attempt to cross the southern pole on some kind of epic ice trek, which would be extremely expensive and very dangerous and almost impossible in a sense, because there's not enough, there's nowhere to stop and fill up on gas. There's just a lot of challenges with doing a project like that. My other thought was, well, you could get in like a plane or a boat or a ship, and you could sail along the entire coast of Antarctica and measure the distance, because if the distance is, if it's truly a flat Earth model, like the UN logo is, then that is going to be a very long distance. But if it's much shorter, like we see on the sphere, then to me it wouldn't prove one or the other, but it would definitely send my brain in a different direction of assumption. But yeah, just the idea that, wow, and it's like, well, shoot, if I'm allowed to question the shape of the Earth, then what else am I allowed to question? I mean, I'm allowed to question anything. I guess I've been questioning reality for a long time, so in a sense, anything that exists in this reality is up for debate, because the entire reality is up for debate, in my opinion, or the perception of the reality.
Definitely, and I think that's one of the important things about the flat Earth. And a lot of people come up to me and say, "Well, what does it matter? Does it that the Earth is flat or not?" And I say, "Well, maybe it might not affect your daily life, in and of itself, but the idea that we have the theory out there matters a whole lot. It's going to change how people think and how they act, because all of a sudden they are being put in a position where they have to question their own beliefs and say, well, why do I know the Earth is round? And even if they come away with it from our experience, simply knowing why they believe what they believe, having gone out and tested it for themselves, we've done some real good in the world. If we've shown them the Earth is flat too, all the better. That's that would make me happy too. But that's not all that's important.
Yeah, my thing is, like, a lot of people that are quote unquote into science, they're very skeptical. They're very proud of their skepticism, and to me, they're making certain assumptions a lot of the time. They're trusting what certain scientists are saying. They're trusting other people's research, other people's evidence. So to me, a true skeptic should question, quote unquote factual things, of course. That to me is true skepticism. I've always been a big fan of James Randi. The very entertaining. I think he's still alive, but he's very old now. Of course, a lot of people they hear the term skeptic, they assume you're an atheist, and all you do is like question religion. But to me, it should go both ways. Same with politics. Both sides should be questioned as well.
Oh, definitely. A lot of times, just I'll come across an atheist that claims to be a skeptic, and is doing so because he thinks it's the smart thing to do. But then the arguments he'll be making are all the same logical flaws that you see in some of the creationist arguments, and I don't know, it's disappointing. There seems to be a sort of popularity around appearing smart nowadays and appearing like you like science, but it doesn't extend far enough to actually appreciating the ideals of science and of skeptical thought and rational thought, and that's a shame.
Yeah, that's now. Do you get a lot of negative replies from people just in general?
Oh, all the time. I'd probably say, I don't know, I get 25% of the people that contact me over the course of a week are comments like, oh, "You're an idiot. How could you? You know, I'm disappointed in humanity that you exist. Why don't you jump off the edge? Go kill yourself."
Wow.
All sorts
Pretty
of stuff.
extreme. Yeah, it's because what you're teaching is actually very blasphemous.
Oh yeah, sure. It definitely is blasphemous to the mindset that most people have and their worldview, and I think it does get them angry. Some of this, I have to assume, are people that don't understand what we're trying to say and are simply writing it off and grouping us in with whatever idea they have with the Flat Earth Society. Others might be going around looking for an easy target so they can feel good about themselves. And then there's still others that where the idea just rubs against the very grain of what they've been taught for their entire life, and they don't know how to deal with that. And rather than looking at it, logically, they tend to jump off the edge. So whatever.
But that's a good point, though. Christianity, up until about 200, when Copernicus, they thought that the Earth was flat as well, right? And now mostly Christians, all the Christians, and I think that's even in biblical stories, right? The Earth is flat, or
there's
like
some
that.
references to some things that if you kind of connect the dots, it kind of implies a flat Earth model.
Yeah,
So,
Christianity definitely believed in it for quite a while and changed their mind. And there is a wealth of evidence there. If you were a literalist, to look down. Not that there's anything wrong with that particularly, but if you David Wardlaw Scott wrote a wonderful book called Terra Firma that gets into a lot of the nitty-gritty language details of the Bible and deals with the flat Earth question from a more scriptural basis.
mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting. He'll go in and talk about some of the Jewish original phrasings and how they were translated in different versions and whatnot. And it's a good read if you're interested in that sort of thing. But if you're not interested in biblical literalism, I wouldn't give it a look.
What got me into it was just got me into even looking at flat Earth was an Iranian Sikh. He was like preaching to his people. He was saying these stupid Westerners, they think that the Earth is round and it's flat. And somebody had posted it like, look at this idiot, he thinks the Earth is still flat. And of course, I chuckled in my mind, right?
Yeah, I think most people do laugh at us when they first see us, and we're not stupid. We realize that it's funny, and sometimes we'll play to that. We realize that in the context that we're sitting in, it is a little silly. But I think a lot of them, or hopefully some of them, come back and look at us a little more deeply and realize, well, these guys aren't idiots. They're people like you and me, and they're just trying to find the truth and find their own worldview.
Yeah, I mean, it's no more ridiculous than any. I mean, and so that's what I was asking somebody. I'm like, so, because somebody was getting angry kind of at the idea that people would even. And I don't usually sit there and tell people, hey, I believe this and that. I sit there and I tell them what other people believe, so that way their anger's never like faced at me because I can talk to them a little more rationally that way.
Very
But
well.
I could see them getting all upset, and I was just like, well, what's the problem? Like, let's say people do believe the world's flat, like, because they were acting like this is just terrible, like it's the end of the world, it's going to destroy society, and I'm like, but is it really? Like, what benefit is us? And I'm not talking about quote unquote scientists. I'm just talking about people that work a normal job and just live a normal life, and they don't make scientific breakthroughs and stuff. Like, what is the harm what is the benefit of them believing the world is a sphere? But then what's the harm of them believing it's flat or that we're in the hollow earth or any wild theory at all? I mean, and that person, of course, couldn't give me a direct answer because they were just like, well, it's just they're stupid. And I'm like, yeah, but there's already plenty of stupid people. I mean, you can't outlaw stupidity. And who's to say what is stupid? Because it's only stupid until you realize that actually it was correct. And then you're like, oh, wow, I was actually a complete like asshole because I was making the assumption that I was smarter than this person and then, of course, attacked them, but hadn't really had the open mind to even listen to what they had to say. When I first laughed at Flat Earth, I was thinking about all the other things people laugh about. Well, you'd sail off the edge, this and that, but I had never sat down to actually learn what are the beliefs of the Flat Earth theory. And it's not even what are the beliefs, but a lot of them are more what are the questions they're asking, and where is that leading them? You know what I mean? And that was my excitement, is just the logic of like, yeah, let's go way back and stop getting rid of assumptions in general. Now, what other interesting beliefs or theories are you into outside of the mainstream belief systems?
Well, that's the main one. I'm always interested in everything, though. I'm definitely a curious fellow. Some of my interests, otherwise, are a little more mainstream, would be philosophy of science and mathematics. But I find that the flat Earth alone keeps my plate fairly full.
Do you subscribe at all to the hollow Earth theory? What do you think about that?
Read on it, and there have been some instances where I've said, well, that's an interesting theory. What if I translate that same idea over to the flat Earth? And I found some interesting things down that line. Nothing really to note, but I still read a fair amount about alternative theories. Now that I'll get mentioned in a book where they're mentioning 500 ridiculous ideas or something like that, and I'll go through them and I'll say, well, actually that's a pretty clever idea there. Like, how does that work? Why? What does that explain? Given if I just rip it out, put it in my framework, does it fit? Does it not fit? What does it say? And oftentimes I'll find something interesting. Sometimes it's just garbage or it doesn't make sense. But I think there's definite worth in looking into a lot of odd stuff. One of my favorite authors I guess when I was going through that period of transition to the flat Earth, was Charles Ford. And if you're familiar with him, he pretty much spent his whole life documenting just crazy ideas or crazy instances of things in nature. Raining blood, London turning black for a whole day, frogs falling from the sky, which actually happened in Japan a couple of years ago again. Right. And very odd things like that. And then also put them right next to the idea, the explanations that scientists have given. And when you hear the explanations next to it, you're just like, oh my gosh, these are so ridiculous. Like, and you might not notice with one. You might be like, oh, a gust of wind picked up all these frogs, and that's why it rained frogs in here. But when you start talking about rocks and boulders falling from the sky or some other ridiculous things, and you have like, I don't know, I think you wrote about 5 books that are, good thickness. When you have those many instances, you start to have to question the mindset of the scientist and how much he's yearning for coherency within his own theory, rather than finding truth. How much he can say, okay, this makes no sense. This is just balls, to the wall, crazy, wild. It's raining cats and dogs or something silly. That's a bad example because I don't believe that actually happens, but still. It's raining cats and dogs. I can't explain this. I'm either going to have a mental breakdown and my entire theory, or I'm going to have to make up some crazy explanation where some gust of wind, I don't know, tore down a animal shelter and threw a bunch of, carried them across, 100 couple miles and dropped them in a city. It's just it's interesting.
The best thing scientists can say about that is nothing to see here. I mean, they just really can't come up with anything. Their mind will not allow them to.
Well, it's like those rocks that move along in the desert. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
I haven't. The explanation I heard, it didn't really sell me. I was like, well, I think it's still a mystery. I don't think you guys really got it figured out like you thought. And of course they'd say, no, no, we do, because this math equation. And I'd be like, yeah, I know you're showing me that, but I'm still going to say, what the heck, is where I'm staying at with that.
Yeah, sometimes it's stretched a little too thin to believe, and even going through the math, it's like, well, I get why you're trying to say this and why you're trying to prove it and everything, but
Well, people like a definitive answer. They don't like a mystery because it bugs them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Now, tell me this, John. What is your belief of like how big is the sun and how far away is it, and the moon as well?
Right. Well, based on my current research that I'm at now, I would say it's about the same. A lot of the problems that you come up with flat Earth theory kind of melt away once you make that satellite realization. I have in the past believed in other theories where they're closer. It's more like 3,000 miles, things like that. But my current view is that they're roughly about the same.
So you're saying that basically when we view with a telescope and we look and we see these stars way out there, like, because a lot of the flat Earth people imply that those are maybe like a lot closer and they're inside some kind of a dome, that they're being projected up there. Are you saying you don't believe that's true? You think they're actually just as far away as they appear to be by standard science?
I do, but I'm hesitant on that, and there have been many times in my career of being a flat Earth theorist that I've had to change my mind over to saying, oh, they are far away, or oh, they are close, simply because I've been presented with new data. The idea that they are close, though, is a very interesting one, and it's kind of highlighted through an experiment. And a lot of people will come to us and say that Aristophanes proved the Earth was round. If you recall, he was a scholar that went and put sticks into the ground and measured the angle of their shadows to determine the diameter of the Earth, not to actually prove that it was round. He assumed it was round. And what's very interesting is that if you look, probably, I wish I got to get a good date for that, didn't remember when it is, but there are Taoist scholars from ancient China that years and years before performed the exact same experiment and came out with without assuming the Earth was round, and instead they assumed it was flat. This led them to realize that the stars were close, and you see that same argument come back up in the 1900s, sort of Robothamic ideas, where the stars are actually close, and that's where that comes from. It's sort of like there's two ways to solve the equation using trigonometry, and you can either say they're close and far away, or they're far away and like that, and so you're solving a triangle two different ways, and you're getting wildly different results, which is I guess kind of ties into my point earlier where I'm solving Einstein's work a different way, and we get the exact opposite result. It really
Yeah.
On the scientific method as a way to truth, or at least a single truth rather than a larger truth. Sorry, my little cat here is making a bit of noise.
That's all right.
The cat's got a comment.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking, no, shut up. Earth is flat. How could you think that? My cat hates it.
So I did watch a documentary called Under the Dome, which is on YouTube. It has a few 100,000 hits. It's quite a long 2-hour documentary, and they'd say, and they agree with that the sun is 1,000 miles.
Yeah, it's way closer. It's way closer and way smaller, they say.
And the stars are 1,300 miles. Like they've measured it somehow. I didn't get an explanation on that, but I think that in the dome theory, that's what they think.
The Taoist experiment comes in. That's how it was first calculated around the time of Robotham, and there's some variations on that lead to slightly different numbers, but
okay.
And my thing is that some people say that the whole flat Earth model with a potential dome or the boundaries or whatever it is like proof of a creator.
Mm-hmm.
They say it points in that direction, and I guess I could see how they believe that, but it doesn't necessarily. I mean, it would just imply that physics and the creation process that we've been taught stems from, like you said, incorrect data. I'm not sure. I can't, in my mind, picture how a flat Earth would form. Because obviously the physics would be so dramatically different. It does seem to me that there is some kind of, creative hand that's required in a system like that, or unless it's eternal in some way, I guess
Right.
that would be another option.
The thing about the flat Earth theory is that we do have a lot of views. I've heard from both camps people that have believed in the dome due to a god having created it, or because of it, believe in a god, which I think is the second of those is a little more defensible. And I've heard people that don't believe in a god and still believe in the dome. As far as how it's formed, we usually aren't one to put forth theories of that sort of nature to make a genesis story when we don't have proper data, unlike Big Bang theorists, which are more than happy to take the small data they have and stretch it to try to explain the whole universe, despite having missed a planet in their own solar system supposedly, or not, we'll see. It might just be another Vulcan.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, just off the top of my head, I've thought down the line a bit, and there's, and this might be something we have to touch on later, but one of the explanations for gravity, or its lack of existence, is that the Earth is accelerating upwards, and so if you were to be standing on the Earth and you threw up a ball, the Earth would accelerate up to meet the ball. And so instead of things falling down, everything's moving up to meet it. Given a long enough time, I could see how this might flatten the body and create sort of a bow shock area around it. Again, I would be hesitant to say that's truth or anything, but it's an interesting idea.
I mean, that would suggest that there's something underneath us, right? That the space has to fill in behind.
Yeah, usually there's the belief that either the universe is expanding underneath us, or above us, or both, or that there's some sort of energy source down there. It's actually been jokingly named the universal accelerator. I mean, dark matter and dark energy, just simply because of how silly the idea. It seems like an equally sized hole in both theories.
Right. So I have a few questions that I thought of when I was just sitting around brainstorming yesterday, and one of them was, what do you think that NASA and those types of people are discovering in space with like rovers on Mars and things like that? These satellites that go out and take pictures of nebulas and they're way out in space. What do you think they're taking pictures of?
Well, personally, I believe they're taking pictures of something close to what they believe they are. I think the more common view would be either that that they're taking pictures of these motes, these stars that are closer to Earth, or other bodies, and they're simply mistaking what's going on there. I think that would be by far the more common view. Another view is that all that's being fake, but that's actually a lot more minority view than many realize. Usually restrict the fakeness to a few astronauts and a few people in key positions, and believe that the rest of the conspiracy doesn't really need more people because of the compartmentalized nature of both knowledge and engineering in these fields.
Huh. So what about the old, I think it was from 1971, the picture NASA claims was taken from space.
Of the Earth?
Of the Earth, yeah. A lot of the other photos are admitted to be composite images from satellites, but what is your thought on that? Because they're saying, hey, we took this picture from outer space and it's clearly a sphere, a ball-shaped planet. So I mean, to me, that's not based on false data. Like, somebody's lying, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's two ways to look at that. Someone's lying, and they could even be doing it with no idea that the Earth is round or flat. They could just be a good press secretary or whatnot. On the other hand, we would Leo Ferrari, which some flat Earth groups nowadays actually put in the conspiracy in the Illuminati. Though sometimes I've actually been accused of being in the Illuminati, which was quite a laugh. But he famously said that given that space is curved, a round Earth, I mean, a flat Earth would appear round due to light, bending away from it, and that's one of the things that led me to my satellite theory, and my extension of Einstein's relativity, which if you can even call it an extension.
So it's maybe, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So, well, if it's space is curved, then also I guess time would be curved along with it, right? Because it's all space time, or is that true?
Yeah, you'd have the same realization that you get in Einstein before you start getting to the nitty-gritty math, where you have Minkowski space and parabolic. And let's ignore all that. You're still going to have the twin paradox, where one will age slower out in space, and when the twins come back together, one will be slightly older than the other.
Right.
You'll have the if you were to take an atomic clock and put it on a train, you still have the photon having to travel more distance as it's moving, and thus time being dilated.
Mm-hmm. So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you might believe that that they went to the moon.
That's one of those things that I'd be hesitant to say either way.
Uh-huh.
There's a famous YouTube video on that picture you were talking about, Eon, with the guys standing on the moon. They take a picture of Earth.
Right.
In that YouTube video, they download the original image that was sent out, and they take it into Photoshop and just change the contrast, and they realize that around the moon was perfectly square. Like it was just cut out of blank space and then pasted onto it, and then taken another picture of it.
Yeah, I saw that.
That was the moon or not. They are NASA is just an awful organization. That's I believe they're stealing money from the public. I don't think they're above lying. Even if they went to the moon, and they've done a really poor job of trying to convince us, it should be something that everybody in the world is happy about, and some great milestone of our culture. And instead we have people saying, look, you guys copy pasted a planet and put it on a black background. Come on, like, why would you even do that? You were there. Take 10 pictures, get the right photo, take 100 pictures. How much money did we spend to get there?
Where's all that money going, right?
The beach, and I don't not take a few photos just because I want to remember that moment. This is one of the greatest moments in humanity. And you're like, oh, we got this bad picture in 1974, and it's got the square around it when you look carefully, and there's a whopper, there's a that's a fictional creature. There's a a groundhog or something on the moon in the background. It's like, come on, guys.
That's true. Now, Solo Cat 1980 on our YouTube channel here says that NASA employees are Freemasons. They take blood oaths to never reveal the secret of their craft.
Oh, I've heard that. I've heard those allegations.
I've heard the same thing about scientists.
That's true.
So I don't know. One thing about NASA that really bugs me, and it bugs me on a completely different level than the whole flat Earth thing, and it also just goes to show how shady they are as an organization, is that a lot of their funding comes from basically ripping off the American public. They'll get paid to develop this technology to go to space or whatever, like say Velcro or what's that? The bedding that they have, the memory foam bedding.
Memory foam, yeah.
Yeah, and then they'll sell that. They develop the technology, and so this technology should be owned by the American people. They're the government-funded group.
Right.
And then they sell it to a third party, which then sells it to citizens. So citizens have to pay twice as much for this research, once to the private corporation, and then another time in taxes. And so they're kind of swindling out the common person from their tax money, just so that they can do whatever they want with it, without the oversight of funding committees. And if you can't trust them with just simply taking the money that we give them, without being greedy and trying to figure out a con to get more, how can you trust them when they tell us that the Earth is round? How can you trust them when they give us these photos that you could, if they were already trustworthy and you saw that little black box there, you'd be like, oh, someone, just thought the photo wasn't that great and was trying to make it look nicer. But it's hard to make that leap for them when they're already ripping us off.
So on a globe model, we have what they call, the Earth is tilting on an axis, right? It's kind of wobbling a little bit, and the sun rotates around the Earth. Everyone knows that theory. But on the flat Earth theory, the sun goes on the outer edges, supposedly, or maybe in the middle of our area. But how do we explain seasons in the flat Earth? Like winter, fall.
Sorry, you seem to be breaking up a bit, but I think you seem to be talking about seasons and how
Yes.
on many models you have the flat Earth, and above it you have the sun rotating like that. Sort of, well, it's a bit hard to see, in a circle above it. And then as the seasons change, it changes location, or rather, not as the seasons change, but causing the seasons, it changes location and diameter, thus causing issues like changing daylight times, as well as how much heat a certain region would get, causing different weather patterns and whatnot.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I can buy that. I mean,
Yeah, sounds good.
hey, why not?
I mean, if your sun's going around in like an egg shape maybe around the flat Earth, and it kind of changes direction at some point, or maybe it has its own wobble.
Right. Exactly.
All right, and let's see. We had another YouTube question up here from Cindy Pritchard. It seems that people get hung up on the why part. When do we move on from people who think the why?
Well, what exactly do you mean the why?
I guess why.
Why think the Earth is flat?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's soon. I think it's a kind of a useless question. Obviously, the why is because we're searching for the truth. Because we have evidence that we feel is conclusive enough that to lead us to believe it. There are several other why arguments we can make. I could definitively prove as far as what's suitable for an academic proof rather than an actual proof, that having the flat Earth Society around is helpful. Again and again in philosophy of science and the history of science, we see incorrect ideas being repurposed later for good, for correct ideas. You don't often see ideas die. You see them come back up again somewhere else in a more true way. And so even if we are wrong, the why is silly. It's just missing the point.
She clarified why would they lie? I guess they being the scientific establishment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That seems silly. There are a lot of reasons why people would lie, and I wish people would get over that question. It takes only minor thought to come up with a few reasons. Even if you don't believe the Earth is flat, before you ask that question to a flat earther, you would think, well, what could they possibly think? Why would someone lie about the shape of the Earth? And the reasoning is there's so many reasons that one can think of. You just have to be closed-minded to make the statement that, to ask the question, why? Why would someone lie about this? People lie all the time. And the reasoning, is often hidden by the lie as well.
Well, I mean, and of course, I've heard it explained that only the people at the top are the liars. Everyone under them is just going by the knowledge we have. What we've been educated on is it's a series of building blocks. You're not learning trigonometry when you're 4. When you're real young, you're watching Sesame Street, and they're giving you the building blocks of thought. Ironically, when you're learning about letters and words, it's called spelling class. So they're putting a spell on your mind to train your perception into this direction and thought process. And it goes on, and then, of course, in math, you come across stuff where they call imaginary numbers, which is always interesting to me. I'm like, okay, we're getting into fantasy land here. Of course, I know what those really are. They're not fantasy. They're paradoxical numbers. But just the naming of them called imaginary numbers to me implies that, we're going into fantasy land here now. And if you're basically paying attention, they've told you what's going on.
I agree. And when you look at imaginary numbers, it's almost like they're hinting at, hey, we got this, we know there are these holes in mathematics, and we're using this somewhat shady reasoning, and we're going to point it out directly and say it's imaginary. And at some point, that got lost, and we've used imaginary numbers so long that we no longer question them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess even zero is not a number, but we call it a number. You know what I mean? Like it's the absence of a number. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say so, but I've heard that argument before.
I mean, I guess it's really just what it represents, which is the
Sure.
idea that you understand the representation. Which, of course, the zero is, you can see what shape that is. You
Yeah.
can't tell if it's 3D though or 2D. It's hard to say.
A little pear shape.
And then, of course, 8 is like double whammy.
It's
I
the
guess,
hollow zero theory.
Right out then.
The hollow zero theory. I always like the thought that I heard. What is it? In ancient Kabbalah, they say that God created the universe by mixing letters and numbers. And to me, that's kind of cool because we kind of perceive the world through letters and numbers based on the training that they've given us. What was my point I was going back to? Oh yeah, so you got the liars at the top, who many think are the Illuminati, who are Luciferian, pedophiles, and some potentially reptilian, extraterrestrial, multidimensional beings that have us under control and are eating us in some way or feeding on our energy. But obviously you got good religious people that think that's crazy, but they believe that there's this dark entity that's against God who was, anyway, they're trying to keep us under control. They're trying to keep us from knowing the truth of creation, and it's just a series of lies. Some would say that those people are paranoid, but either way, let's say it's true, and let's say that there is this dark, leadership from the top. I'd say pretty much just one level down, they could have them all confused, and everybody else is not actually. They're in on the lie, but they don't know it. So they're being completely honest. They're telling you complete truth. They're basing everything on the knowledge that they've been trained over the course of probably 30 years of their life. It took to learn all that stuff. And like you said, it's conditioning, and it is hard to, I was raised religious, so actually I kind of experienced that, the experience of shaking off what is known to be true and feeling the doubt and feeling kind of like you wasted a lot of your time. You kind of have to be honest with yourself and say, hey, yeah, I got questions and I've wasted a lot of my time or potentially have. You got to go through that process,
Yeah, it's tough, and it's probably one of the most notable experiences people have in life is either converting to something or converting away from it. Just that shift that is required in thinking, and not only in thinking, but in the way you think, that you can think of different theories now and not take something as rotely true, no matter what. That's one of the most important experiences.
Now,
I would say so.
Eon, you had your own experience with the firmament.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I wanted you to tell that story. Good.
So, want to do the whole story or just the firmament part?
Do the whole thing. Yeah. Let's talk about the oxide that you were inhaling.
Yeah, this kind of ties in with the. We did an episode about near death or afterlife type stuff, and we had a lady on who had written a book, and she's kind of an expert.
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of an out-of-body experience, possibly near-death type experience, but the experience I had does align with this possible, dome idea. But either way, I had experimented and abused and inhaled a bunch of nitrous oxide, like medical-grade nitrous oxide, for recreational purposes, and I basically left my body, or the true myself kind of zoomed out, and it felt like I was going up, straight up into outer space, and I could see around me. I mean, it was happening, I was flying through outer space. And when I hit the edge, yeah, it wasn't like I went out forever. I hit this boundary zone, which was it wasn't. I think a lot of people perceive the dome to be kind of made of glass, but in this case, what I experienced, and this is way before I ever heard of any flat Earth theory or any dome or firmament or whatever. I went through, but it was like a layer of epidermis, it was skin, and it was probably 10 to 20 feet, and I shot through it, and it was it was like living tissue. I mean, it wasn't like a representation of it. Like I felt this kind of like, squishy kind of moist sensation as I slipped through, and I popped out on the other side. And I didn't through this process. I don't remember looking back and seeing our Earth as it in itself. I guess maybe I didn't question to look at it, but
Mhm.
I popped out on another what appears to be flat plane, and but everything was like more real there, and it was everything was uplifting. It was like a lot of the after death experiences, except for there was no like specific religious person there. But there was the light, which was conscious, and it loved me, and it was uplifting me, and there was like this kind of angelic like singing and vibration and like orgasmic thing going on everywhere, and it was like amazing, better than like any drug you could ever do. So that kind of goes in line with the like I hit the edge of the firmament or the dome, and I somehow went through it, like the boundary zone. I escaped the boundary. But of course, in this story, when I felt doubt, I had these two weird, big, shadowy beings came at me really fast and furiously, and they grabbed me, and they just threw me back into my body. Oh yeah, what I didn't mention is that in this experience, when I was there, I like looked at my hands, and they actually were hands with fingers just the same, but it was me still, but I was made of like compressed like light or like energy. So I have this belief that we're all actually just like truly like light beings, in a more of a true sense. Anyway, they threw me back down to, third dimensional earthly reality, and I woke up very confused, and here I am. Obviously, I didn't die.
Right.
At least you think you didn't.
A pretty.
I'm pretty sure. I hope. I might have. Maybe I didn't. Anyway.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is there's a famous wood carving of a fellow reaching beneath the dome and reaching beneath the veil and sticking his head through. I believe he was an alchemist or some other truth seeker of that type. On the other hand, something that I really find interesting about your story is taking experience out of the mundane and more into the sacred. When you look back at a lot of the discoveries in science, you can point them to mystical experience like you've had, something that's outside of the mundane experience of your life that reveals great truth to you in an almost timeless nature. And so I wouldn't discount your beliefs based on that. It sounds very interesting. Heck, I'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah, me too.
You know.
Hey, it's just as strange to me. I mean, I just experienced it, and that was that. I wasn't given any explanation from anybody. It was just like, well, it happened, and it was more real than this right now.
One of my guys.
I can explain that.
One of my guys.
Known as the varieties of religious experience, which cover a lot of different experiences that are outside the ordinary. I wouldn't be fooled by the title to take religious to mean Christian. It's more about spiritual and otherwise like existences that take things out of the mundane, the normal, covering things like night terrors all the way to experiences like you've had. There's a tale in there about a blind fellow who had this odd experience where he found someone slipping under the door and sliding in and then coming up. And it's interesting to try to get to the root of what some of these say, because there is a definite tie between these experiences we have and discovery. If you look at Thomas Crick, he said he discovered the double helix because he took LSD. If you and there are thousands of examples of this. Tesla invented his motor because he was walking down the park and had an hallucination of this giant burning, turning wheels, and that directly led him to invent it. And you see, Roger Penrose is well known for traveling to a purely mathematical realm, as he puts it, and discovering his mathematical truth there. So it's very. People, there you go.
Tesla.
And so it's all over the place, and yet people want to say that science and scientific discovery is a rational process. It follows method, it follows this and that, and we have some compelling evidence that that's not the whole picture, and that experiences like yours are valid, at least in some way, if not towards scientific discovery.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about my experience is, of course, I'm left wondering, was it just a drug hallucination? Was it
Sure.
truly real? Was it all in my mind? It makes me wonder, is everything just always in my mind? This is years before I learned anything about like the New Age movement. Before I learned anything about other religions. It kind of like awakened me in a sense.
Sure.
Just and not necessarily like made me feel like enlightened and I see the Matrix or something, but
Sure.
it awakened me into like a mindset of like not assuming everything to be the way it is presented, just like and asking like, well, why is this way? And I guess in the end, and it was life changing either way. Like
Yeah.
I can't.
That's the important
It's
part.
like taking the red pill on the Matrix. Like you're
Yeah.
left with that's it. Now you know, and you have to go forward knowing that.
Yeah, definitely, and that's one of the things William James mentions is that you can't really base the worth on this on its mundane physical explanation. The worth of these mystical experiences is clearly beyond that. It's clearly what you take off from it and live your daily life with. Um, you could say, oh well, you ate a ham sandwich one day, and that led, that ham sandwich for some reason led you to believe in God, which led you to, I don't know, say if your name was Newton, you invented all or discovered all these laws based off that, and or you could say that well, rationality is a disease, much like insanity is. The difference is just how we're looking at it, and so you can't discount what you take away from an experience simply because you may have been on drugs, or you need to judge it for what worth it has. If you take a bunch of drugs and you come out of it wanting to kill everybody, well, obviously that should discount that experience a bit.
Right.
Hey, somebody's saying that you're not a true flat earther. What do you have to say about that?
I've been hearing that a lot lately, and it's what I was touching on earlier when I said people have been saying I'm in the Illuminati, or
You're giving out. Are they saying you're giving out disinformation? You work with Alex Jones, possibly?
I'm not familiar with Alex Jones, but I don't know. I've been hearing that a lot lately, and I think a lot of it's been coming from Eric Duvay's group. I believe he used to be a member on our forum back in the day. I don't know. Maybe it sat poorly. We did something to upset him or something. I don't know. I've been working on this for 15 years. I've been, like I said earlier, people call me up, tell me to kill myself, to jump off the edge. People make fun of me in real life, like not past my actual administrative duties with the society. I can't imagine what motive I would have to be sitting here lying about this, getting so much grief about it. And I'm sure they've felt the same amount of grief from when they've talked about the Flat Earth Society. If they're on Twitter and you mention the Flat Earth Society, it's not too long until some globalist will come up and say you're retarded, say you're stupid, you should go kill yourself. I just don't see why, and I'd love to help her, him, or the listener understand. I'm not some part of an Illuminati. Look at my house. It's not that nice. I'd be doing much better off.
I do want that picture behind you, though. I want to believe. I need one of those.
Nice.
I guess you could say that you're experiencing persecution in the way that a lot of religious people. It validates that they are onto some form of truth when the rest of the world is constantly persecuting them.
Well, sure. I don't know if it validates it or not, but it's certainly something that's similar. As far as the flat earthers attacking me, though, I think it's damaging to our cause, frankly, and I think it's damaging to free thought. We have a hard enough time fighting against, globalists to begin with, without people turning on our without us turning on ourselves, without us making these segmented groups across our community. We should be happy enough that each of us believes the Earth is flat for our own reasons and are trying our best to reach towards truth. Something that I think most flat earthers would agree that most round earthers do not do. So
Yeah, it's like,
all right,
similarities, not our differences.
There you go.
Sure, yeah, and I joined a vegan community not long ago, and there's some people who tell me I can't, you aren't vegan enough. You just try your hardest, I guess. I mean, what are you gonna do? There's also a story about social justice warriors who, there was a college that has a diversity program, and someone, a white woman, was in this diversity program, and they wanted her to be president, and she changed her sex to male. She wanted to be male. And then all of a sudden they kicked her out because she wasn't diverse enough.
Oh, weird.
So, because she's now a white male. So it's like these things, sometimes the groups just eat themselves, sometimes.
Well, the flat earth movement is interesting because, as I've looked at it, there's clearly people out there that are not flat earthers that are playing the troll role, and they are coming up with some insane, hilarious, scientific explanations, and subtly making fun of, they're making fun of quote unquote rational science, and making some hilarious stuff. Though I give it up to them. I like it. It's entertaining me.
I mean, I appreciate the humor in it and everything. And there was a time in my life that I guess I shouldn't be so misunderstanding to these people that are calling me part of the Illuminati, because there was a time in my life when I was running the Flat Earth Society forums, and I got very mad about these people trolling, and because it was something serious to me, and while at times I did appreciate their humor, and I even took part in it sometimes, it came to a point where I thought it was damaging to the cause. Now that I've grown a little older and gotten a little wiser, I'm kind of looking back at that and saying, well, no, that's kind of silly. Even if they are just joking, they don't believe the Earth is flat, I don't think they're causing any real damage to us. And in fact, I think a lot of the people that join our particular society do so because they were questioned so much by these trolls, and these trolls sort of fit the place of a first wave of questioning, just as, say, a monk might try to break down the way you think by giving you thousands of different arguments to look at, and just so you can open your mind and be able to accept, well, yeah, there are different ways. There are different ways to look at this. I don't accept every view in Robotham's work, but I do accept that there are alternate views to look at it, and that if you want to believe the Earth is round, you have to explain those views first. And they provide a very excellent source of people to question people. It doesn't sit the best with me. I don't know how I feel about it on a moral level, but it's not something I can change. I've tried to change it, and it's kind of like asking the internet not to be the internet. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you have to accept trolls. That's why when I say it, I'm entertained by them, because that's why I've accepted them. There's no way they're going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work with them.
Exactly.
And, show them that you're all. It's kind of a big game, and you're playing it with them. You're not fighting them.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's a game, but I'd like to show them that I'm playing it like a game. But it definitely is a serious thing for me, and so it does get upsetting when people attack me.
Sure, people can just be like, and that's always my annoyance, is like, I love having a good debate with somebody, but it's like, to me, the debate ends when they start just name calling. It's like, come on, like, you can call me poopy head all you want, but that doesn't really prove your point. You can say I'm an idiot, this and that, but like, to me, if you have to me, the first person to go down to the name calling level has just lost the debate. And not that they're wrong, it's just that they've given away their privilege to have the intelligent discussion.
Sure, and I agree with that. I mean, when people start taking an argument away from its rational basis and start taking it into name calling, and even on a lesser level, things like the conspiracy, you're starting to. Well, let me backtrack on that one. I don't think that's true about the conspiracy. But once you take away from the rational side of the argument. You're not having an argument anymore. You're just name calling. You're just yelling at each other, and you're just pretty much going la 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 la. And I don't have any time for that, really. I don't have time to talk to people that don't want to talk to me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I've been known to make some memes.
I've made quite a few myself. Find them on Twitter if you're interested in some of them, but
exactly. So, John, you are a member of the Flat Earth Society, is that correct?
Yep, I'm the American president of the Flat Earth Society, and I'm administrative member on Daniel Shenton's International Flat Earth Society.
Okay, and that's flatearthsociety.org, is that right?
TheFlatEarthSociety.org.
Okay.
And, you can find us on Facebook at Flat Earth Today, or on Twitter you can find myself at John Eric Davis.
All right, great. And Eon, do you have any parting questions for John?
I know after we end this, I'm going to think of a ton of stuff that I missed.
know, right? Exactly.
You're more than welcome to have me back.
Yes.
It's always a pleasure.
I mean, and to our listeners, of course, don't just go by this episode and end it. If you're interested, start Google searching it, start looking at videos, and like we discussed about being skeptic, be a skeptic of everything. So anything you find, research it, question it, doubt it, try to think, how can I test this for myself? How can I prove it with my own eyes and my own brain and my own sense of reasoning?
And if you need help, any of your viewers are free to contact me directly at john@theflatearthsociety.org.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks a lot, John, for the interview.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right.
All right, guys. Have a good one.